everybody. This is Sophia here again, and welcome to our Pause and Joy podcast. I'm here with Patti, and today we are going to have a conversation about the most infamous topic in spirituality, which is the ego.
Yes.
And how it basically has been talked about so much. It has been mentioned so much. And I remember growing up, this thing that I would hear from my humble, more, nicer people say, oh, that person is too egoistic.
Mm-hmm.
And that would the ego would only be limited to people who had a certain kind of arrogance. But when I learned about spirituality at Pause and Joy, the ego is part of everybody.
Yes.
So how would you start describing an ego to our audience right now?
Such a loaded question, first thing in the morning. But, well, let's give it a go. So back in the 60s and 70s, there was a very famous boxer called Muhammad Ali. And he used to say that he was the greatest. He used to say, I am the greatest. Not to himself in the mirror as an affirmation. He used to say it everywhere he went. And he said it with conviction. And people were just dazzled by him, as well as his critics would be like, who do you think you are? And we've all heard that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a few years, Michael Parkinson, who was a great journalist who had a talk show, actually asked him, because they used to like to mentally bow, because Muhammad Ali was also an intellectual and a philosopher and obviously a great boxer. But he said, why do you always say that you're the greatest? It sounds really arrogant.
Yeah, like you're so
absorbed.
Selfish. It's been labeled, like titled.
And Muhammad Ali's answer in the moment was so pure. And he said, he says, I knew that God made me great.
Mm-hmm.
He said, and if I had been a postman, I'd have been the greatest postman that ever lived. And if I had been a garbage collector, he'd have been the greatest garbage collector. It just so happens he was a boxer. So our projections, our judgments on people who think they're the greatest, is something that we need to look at what this is bringing up for us. What we're seeing in another person as being arrogant is maybe their, own inspiration or their own self-realization of, and how they decide to embrace that is up to themselves. Now, the other thing you asked was about the spiritual ego. And a lot of people will say, well, that's my ego, talking, and
that's not me, that's my ego.
Yeah, well, that's the scapegoat, like the scapegoat of the devil as well.
Yeah.
Don't let me take responsibility for what I just said or my actions, because that was my ego. And the thing is, you are your ego. And the ego starts to form usually around age 2.
Wow.
And when you're sitting in your high chair and you've got your cereal bowl or whatever you're eating, your avocado, and you throw it on the floor. And you watch whoever it is, your mother, your father, lift that bowl. And you realize something. You realize that you have will. And your will, when you throw that bowl, someone else is going to clean it up for you.
And now you can go against somebody else's will of making you sit and eat.
And you can throw that bowl 10 times. And then get quite enjoyment and satisfaction about watching that person lift that bowl.
Over and over again.
Over and over again.
It's a game.
It's a game, and it's biofeedback to the child, because the child is data collecting, whatever you say. And it is, when I do this, this is what happens. And now the ego in psychology is more to do with the personality. And some people then say, because you've got the id, the ego, and the superego. So you've got the unconscious part of the psyche that does things that it doesn't know that it's doing, and which I kind of have a little bit of a problem with, because I think there's willful ignorance.
Yeah, because sometimes you do know you're doing it,
but you don't think anyone's going to call you on it.
Yeah. It's like when you lay in the bed and if you're...
So it's, for me, we get this into this trap of the actor in us, the persona, okay? That we then say that's the ego. Oh, well, that was my ego being the seducer. That was my ego being the whatever it is. And you get into all these different personas, because personality is from the word persona, which means mask. Mm-hmm. So it's all the masks that you wear, all the masks you wear at work, all the masks. Now, is that your ego, or is that just a really good actor and actress? Is that just a way that you have learned how to act in life? So for me, the ego, I used to do a workshop. Mm-hmm. You probably did it.
Yeah, teach the ego to heal.
And it was called Teaching the Ego to Heal. And it wasn't HEAL. It was HEEL.
That was actually the first workshop I did with you.
And it transformed people, because it was 3 hours of really getting down to brass tacks about who you thought you were. And the ego is also your will. Now, I might not want to go to yoga today. Mm-hmm. And I might have to drag myself there, and I hear all this, and then I go into acting mode, right? I pay 2 people going, oh, I don't want to go. No, you should go. No, I don't want to go. I want to sit here and watch Netflix chill.
The reasons.
And then the other one goes, oh, no. So now am I schizophrenic? Because I...
Two personalities.
But now I'm the observer watching these 2 at it. No, because what happens is the ego, when you train the ego to heal, HEEL, that ego engages your willingness, your will to get in the car, even though you don't want to go. Mm-hmm. And you hit the mat. And that's why a lot of great yoga instructors will say, thank yourself
for showing up.
For showing up. Whatever brought you here, thank that, and keep thanking that, and keep acknowledging that is.
That is, yeah.
And know that. Start to know that part of yourself that shows up and is willing. Because when your ego, this part of you doesn't trust you.
And somehow we've made it
because
more
it doesn't trust the actor in you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not the ego. I don't think it's the ego. I think when I studied yoga many years ago, the classics, Raja Yoga, and they would say, oh, you have to battle your ego. You have to battle your ego in the class and the little voices. And I would be like, well, then aren't you in this engagement of killing the ego in your ego? It's like a loop.
Yeah.
Rather than sitting with this thing, because the ego, this thing does not trust you. Yeah. Because it knows you. Mm-hmm. It knows that you say that you're going to do things. You're going to write your book. You're going to write your emails. You're going to do your business plan. You're going to go to yoga. You're going to do all these things. You're going to eat healthily, but you don't do it.
You're going to meditate.
And it knows you so well that it knows that basically you're full of it. Yeah. So it doesn't trust you. And this part of you. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it tries to flush you out. It's kind of like trying to, it's like a spy, it's kind of like, this opera, camera. It's like this operative that's went out in the field and it doesn't trust who's in the control center. Because it knows that you lie to yourself. So I try and with students to transcend this play that you have going on with all of these different characters. And like, okay, let's just get back to the will. Let's get back to what you are willing to do. You know, when I work with people who are depressed and they say, I think it's best that you come at 7 a.m. Because if I don't get out of bed, and I'm willing to get out of bed if you come, and I'll meet them there, you know, or 6 a.m. in the morning, because they know that's where they're at. And they know that they're in their humility and know that that's what they need right now. And they're willing to get out of bed if they ask for help. Yeah. But most people don't allow themselves to be in the humility to say that I need help. Because they're too busy in their ego pretending and acting that everything's fine. I'm fine. And the thing about the word fine is it means fragile, like in fine bone china. What you're really saying is, I'm fragile.
Wow. And that's like a staple response. Everybody is
I'm
like
fine.
So
and you know, it's like high pitched when someone says, I'm fine, I'm not bothered. And you're like going around acting and denying the truth. So for me, the ego, when you can engage and say, okay, the game's up. The game's a bogey. I don't know if you know that expression. We use it in Scotland when it's like, the game's up. You know, I'm putting my hands in the air.
Losing.
I'm putting my hands in the air. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm all out of characters. I'm all out of game, basically. And I'm going to be all in.
And then you just surrender.
And you say, what is it that I'm willing to do? What is it that where is my willingness taking me? If you need a friend to come to yoga with you, you say. If you don't have your home practice yet, but you need to go to classes, go to classes. If you need to go to a meditation group and because you don't have the willingness to be on your own mat or your own meditation practice at home, do that. But know where your willingness is at.
Is that the same as willpower or two different things there?
Well, the thing about willpower is well, it's kind of tricky because you can have the willpower to push through things that aren't good for you.
True. And that's again.
So then we get into prudence.
Yeah.
Then we get into the prudence of, okay, I can be courageous. But am I being courageous and being reckless? Or am I being cowardly? So prudence always was that place of knowing thyself. And that's why it was always important to know the self and know what I need help in and what I need assistance in and where I'm at. Because when you pretend that you're not at where you're at, then you're the loser. So the ego is a very tricky question.
It is.
To say, oh, what is it? And when people are like, whoa, it's like this, and they break it down into little compartments, the ego's slippery.
It is.
Especially when you're on a spiritual practice. Because now you know everything that you think you know. And there's the spiritual ego. Because now I meditate. And I meditate every day. And I do my yoga every day.
It's like another personality. And
now I'm getting really slippery because the ego, the actor knows all the jargon. And it knows how to act in a certain way that has that act down. But it's not the self.
And how do you start then?
And how do you know?
How do you know?
How do you know you're acting being a spiritual actor? Oh, because it's tricky and slippery. And that's why it's always the snake energy, because the snake always flushes out the truth.
It reveals.
The snake is the revealer. If the snake is trying to lure you, and the snake is trying to coerce you and get you to do things, But really what it's doing is revealing a truth in you that you were willing to partake.
Whether you were going to give in to the temptation of that.
And this thing about temptation, it was like, it's this, if you know it doesn't feel correct, it doesn't feel aligned, what are you giving into?
If you sense something is off.
Exactly. Yeah. You're not giving into anything because you're anchored in the self. Even though it might look all like the shiny penny or, the shiny gold or whatever, and it's so alluring, but something doesn't feel right. Trust that. Trust it. And the more you start to trust that is, then your ego is going to, the actor is going to start to subside. It's going to stop, because it's like, oh, like, he or she's got it down. Like, I don't need to worry playing this saboteur or playing this game. And it's like, oh, like, they've got it. It's like it's that trust of the intuition. It's that trust of the self. It's that trust. I don't need to know what you're trying to pull on me. I don't need to know what your game is. I don't need to know what your insecurity is or what your fear is and where you are trying to insert yourself in my life. It just doesn't feel right. And I know that feeling. I don't need to call you on it. I don't need to make you out the bad guy. This isn't right for me.
Even though everything on paper looks good, if it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. And that's something that, because what's the alternative? The alternative is to, oh, I knew that was going to happen. I knew that was going to go sour. I knew that person was going to betray me. I knew it, but what, you wanted to flush them out? I knew it, so I wanted the bad thing to happen so that I was right, because I didn't trust my rightness to begin with. Should I say that again? I didn't trust my alignment to begin with, that I knew something wasn't correct, right, aligned, whatever way you want to kind of put it. It didn't feel light and airy for me. It didn't feel, clear. And that's something that the more you trust that, the more your life will be in ease. The more your life will be in joy. You won't create all this chaos around you for you to be right. That it was going to go bad. So, the ego, it's very difficult for me to just minimalize it down to something that is compartmentalized, because I think when you start to do that, it starts to be slippery. And you also have to always be aware of it in every situation, because the righteousness,
the self-righteousness of things
is you can be right, but it's not kind. And you can be right and you start to sound righteous. So there's all of these components that you need to know yourself.
It can go in all different directions.
And it can go in all different directions, and then all you've got is like all the different maps that it can go. And you've lost yourself. And you've lost yourself because you're too busy in the maps of where it can go. So, and you're giving the ego the maps. You're giving this part of you all the maps.
The coordinates and the maps.
Of where it can all go. Oh, how clever am I? So I think when you just have that inner listening is the most important thing. And you...
How do you start doing that? Like, if somebody was never into a spiritual path, or even if somebody who is already practicing some form of spirituality, how do they start identifying and recognizing these things?
I think you have to start with self-affirmations, and you have to start with, and I think listening to this, I think if you start with saying, instead of saying all of the time, I don't know, because that is, the game is on when you say that you don't know, because you know.
Yeah, we hear that so much. I don't know.
You know.
Uh-huh.
When I have been in sessions with someone and channeling and doing stream of consciousness, and they have to ask the question. And I say, why didn't you ask the question? They're like, well, it seemed like a stupid question when I had to ask it because I knew the answer anyway. So you know 85% of the time, but you go around pretending you don't know. So start with, I know. I might not know what the answer is, but I know something. And I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to move inward of what I know is true for me, what feels right for me, what feels aligned for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then build on that.
And that reminds me actually a very old incident from like a few years ago where I was working with somebody and they would keep saying, oh, I don't know. And we did some work around it, and it went back to her childhood where her mother had told her, if somebody asks you a question, just say you don't know. Just to like keep things under the wraps for whatever reason.
Yes.
And that became a habit into I don't know. And now there were important questions in front of this person.
And you can ask it because that then gets into, a level of unawareness that you normalize. When
And
you know. And you ask yourself, what is it I've accepted in life and that I'm not acknowledging because I have normalized it?
And you posted this on Shivratri a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And I'll read it here. What is it you cannot see or are unable to acknowledge because you've normalized it?
Yes.
What is normalization of something?
The normalization of the things that you just accept because of culture, because of society, because no one wants to really get to the point of the truth. And they have normalized things just happening, or that's just the way it is. Is another statement, or what can I do? Yeah, I mean, it's pointless. And
how is the ego involved in this normalization?
It's agreeable and it's obedient. And it just and it's easier. It's like, oh yeah, but you know the truth, and something doesn't feel right. And you don't act upon it. And these are the things that chip away at the soul. And it might not bother you in your 20s, but let me tell you, when you get into your 40s and your 50s, you lose that point of who you really are. And you are like, what is the point? What is the point of living? What is the point of life? What is the, you're all confused. So, I think if you start with you know that you know. And another good one is to say to yourself, I don't believe that anymore. Whatever it is. And see what happens. Even saying it to yourself when you know you're thinking and ruminating but the wheels are turning.
Or you're on a drive and you know something is going on.
And you're like festering over something. And you just say, I don't believe that anymore. Because your belief is very, very important in the whole mechanism.
Well, that was a good short starting to the ego. And if you're not in your practice, if you don't know where to start, or if some things are not working out, the two things you can start with, like Patti said, was start saying to yourself, I know. And start finding out where you're saying I don't know to the answer. Even if like you're in your restaurant and you're like, oh, I don't know what I want to eat. I don't know what I want to wear. These are very subtle things in your day-to-day life.
At the end of the day, you're going to have to choose anyway.
You have to make a decision.
Are you going to have the salad or are you going to have the fruit bowl? Choose.
And if you're in an argument, if you're not feeling good about something, if you're in a not so pleasant situation, just if you're thinking about it, just say I don't believe in that anymore. And with those two things, I feel we are complete today with our podcast, and you guys have a great time until the next time.
If you have any questions, specific questions of things that you feel that you're in a loop of or what you're doing, you know, do send them in, and then we can address them for practical things, because I think we need to get into practical scenarios rather than the theory of all of this, because I think people really need practical examples of how to move through this. You know, I'm writing a book right now for meditation and looking at this because it always comes up, and we'll talk about that in the part 2 of this podcast. And my tow truck driver, Manuel, the minute I got in the car, the truck, he said to me, "Do you meditate?" And I was like, "Yes." And he said, and for 45 minutes, he asked me everything to do with meditation. And really it was all about the ego, that he was having difficulty with silencing this voice. And the book will be dedicated to Manuel, because we could, you know, I didn't realize that this was such crucial information for people who were really giving it a go. And he'd been meditating for 2 years, but he was just I didn't know if he was doing it right. He didn't know who to speak to, because he didn't want to go to a meditation practice because he didn't feel as if he knew what he was doing. And it was just a fabulous 45-minute conversation. So thank you, Manuel.
Thank you, Manuel.
And I
look forward to having more conversations following in this meditation part of with the ego. Well, thank you so much. If you have any questions or situations or something in your life that is not working out right now, please send it to us at Sophia at Pause and Joy, or on our Pause and Joy Facebook page, and we will talk about it and find information for you. Thank you.